To give his apologies. He was supposed to be here, but he has been called out briefly. So maybe I can now introduce myself, right? So my name is Connie Wangu. I'm a great Pan-Africanist. I believe in the spirit, and in the same regard, he greatly believes in the Pan-African movement, and that is why he has made sure that despite his absence, his speech must be delivered. Okay? So I'm also a former student leader at the University of Nairobi, and I'm a great comrade. And I feel the spirit of comradeship in the room, and I'm so amazed. So allow me to read his speech. So Pan-Africanism has its origin in the struggle of African people against slavery and injustice. In the last century, the Pan-African movement has been at the vanguard of the struggle of the realization of the dignity of Africans wherever they may be. The first wave of the Pan-African movement struggle began in the early 1900s with the Back to Africa movement as advocated by Marcus Garvey and others. The aim was that the slaves and former slaves had to return to Africa, which was successful to a certain extent. Pan-African movement started formally in 1900 when people living in London, like Trinidadian barrister Henry Sylvester Williams, called a conference of black people to protest against racial discrimination and other issues of concern to black people. This was followed by a series of congresses, with the first one held in 1919 in Paris, France, organized by African American scholar and political activist Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. Pan-Africanism then was an ideology that attempted to create a sense of brotherhood and collaboration among all people of Africa, decent whether they lived inside or outside Africa. Comrades, ladies and gentlemen, as you are all aware, many people lost their livelihoods and were manned so that the later generation was to live a prosperous life. It is sad to know that years later, Africans are condemned to death by both their black imperialists and real colonizers. This begs the question of why we are here. Hence, we must be quick to answer the objectives of today's meeting as coined by the organizers. The objectives are: to my fellow youth, what inspires you to be part of this movement that is full of sacrifices and regrets? The classical cases of some of the greatest African leaders who achieved much in their youth days they were able to organize themselves into meaningful agents of change. Raila Odinga, Sankara, Museveni and Mandela, just to mention but a few, did splendid work in emancipating their people from mental, social and political slavery. Indeed, it is sad to know that the contemporary youth is busy with unnecessary things that the Western imperialists are using through the media to glorify a stoplight. Things like tattooing are highly regarded as opposed to championing for good governance and promoting Ubuntu. Fellow comrades, as for me, my role in the Senate is well defined. I must now use the Parliament to promote and champion for the Pan-African movement through legislation and ensuring that Pan-Africanism and regionalism are well created for in our policies. Comrades, I shall equally reach to other comrades as push for their reorganization and restricting of the Pan-African Parliament so as to reach her objectives. The nominees for this Parliament must then come or be recommended for the Pan-African Movement fraternity. These leaders must be people who have Pan-Africanism at heart or understand its key tenets. Comrades, we must also ensure that African Union, as a matter of agency, creates a directorate for Pan-Africanism in her structures. The Pan-Africanism of yesteryears must be rekindled, rejuvenated, and practiced by the youth of this generation when, for instances, we look at the great legends like Sankara, who are ready to lose their lives by confronting the enemy by saying that our country produces enough to feed us all. Alas, for lack of organization, we are forced to beg for food, aid. It's this aid that instills in our spirits the attitude of beggars. He believed that Burkina Faso and Africa in general has the ability to be self-reliant and not rely on the foreign aid. He therefore fought hard to rid his country of the influence of the French. Sankara advocated for the local production and consumption of locally made goods and instilled in his people the belief that they could solve their food and water scarcity problems through mobilized self-sufficiency. Many of Sankara's foreign policies were largely focused on anti-imperialism. He blamed the imperialism and the foreign companies which made profits with Africa, denying its development so that they can be selling products to a continent which could be self-sufficient. We continue to remember that Pan-Africanism embodies our resistance against criminalization of the black race and African people, the destruction of our family life, values, social organization, against the oppression of our women and abuse of children. We therefore refuse to agonize, but instead choose to organize ourselves in the Pan-African movement to realize our strength in unity, independency, stability, social progress, democracy, and freedom. My fellow youth, as has been quoted many times, youth can be a creative force, a dynamic source of innovations, and they have undoubtedly, through history, participated, contributed, and even catalyzed important changes in the political system. Power sharing dynamics and economic opportunities. However, youth also face poverty, barriers to education, multiple forms of discrimination, and limited employment prospects and opportunities. Youth must know that if they do not fight for their space and opportunities, nobody will give this. And this is led to what is called the Arabic awakening. Fellow youth, we must now make the right choices as we head to this election that shall be a determining moment, especially for Kenya and the region. Our university leaders of today, like Arega, must mobilize, organize all their teams towards the last liberation. Finally, the clarion call. The Pan-African movement rests on the shoulders of those who will live to cherish, defend, and further its ideals and channel them into meaningful, practical ways that will liberate Africa from now clear threat of recolonization exhibited by powers ruling the unpopular world today, and more so from economic bondage. Africans must therefore, more than ever before, open up new social, political, and economic space and exert their energies into progressive efforts to guide our continent in these hard times. We in the Pan-African movement believe in collaborative, positive thought and responsibility. We therefore call upon all Africans of all shades of political opinion, religions, and cultural convictions to join in the struggle to reclaim Africa for Africans. Let us bear in mind the words of Frantz Fanon, which he said, "Every generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission and either betray it or fulfill it." The conclusion. As Pan-Africanists, we believe that Pan-Africanism is the panacea to all our problems Hence, we must support the Kenyan movement with all the resources, including ideas and also financial resources. There is only one color that African unity smashed the borders by Thomas Sankara. Thank you.
Round of applause.